Hello and welcome to the Rabblecast. My name is Eric Hernandez, here along with
Doug.
Yes, sir. We did it. We fulfilled the meme. We've Barbenheimer. I can't even say it anymore. We've done the Barbenheimer thing. Why? Why not? Right? Doug, what'd you watch?
I watched Oppenheimer.
And I watched Barbie for the hell of it. Why not? Let's have fun. We tell you all about it. We take the pros, the cons, what we loved, what we didn't love. We have questions back and forth. And I'll tell you right now, Doug did a much better job about describing Oppenheimer ever than I can do with Barbie. So the first part is a lot of fun. But at the very end, we talk about the passing of one Mr. Paul Reubens. Pee-Wee Herman, for those of you who don't know, because I realize that, different generations might not realize who Pee-Wee is. But stick around. We give you a little history about Pee-Wee Herman himself, where he's been, what he's done, and what he's left us. That's all to be said. We are brought to you by InsidePulse.com. You can find us in the podcast section. I'm stumbling under my words now. You can also find us on YouTube.com, youtube.com/Rabblecast. Check out the show over at Rabblecast.libsyn.com. Send us a tweet at Rabblecast. Actually, it's not send us a tweet anymore, is it? It's send us an X. What is it? It's no longer Twitter.
X-seat?
What's that?
I don't know. I still call it. It's still Twitter to me, damn it.
Oh, okay, fine. Message us at Twitter. At us at Twitter, whatever it was. Check us out on Facebook for the Rabblecast Facebook fan page and email us, rabblecast@gmail.com. Anything else?
I think we hit the notes pretty well.
All right. Get into it. Have fun. Enjoy the show.
Here we are back again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm vacillating between feeling all right and looking forward to a long weekend and fighting overwhelming feelings of dread about the future.
Well, those are never going to go away. The
I
dread
know,
about the future.
sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. You're telling me there, fella.
Yeah, I've been dealing with my own feelings of dread and anxiety recently, so I'm right there with you. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, doing this show with you alleviates that just for a little bit, because we can be in the here and the now and not worry about what's to come or what's going tomorrow or next week or whatever the case is. I don't have to answer those questions now. I don't have to solve those problems now. I can just have fun and talk about silly shit with you.
Yeah, pretty cool.
So let's get down to it, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rabblecast. You probably heard the intro. We're going to record that later if you haven't caught on by now. But Doug and myself, well, let me ask you a question, Doug. I know I'm kind of high energy.
That's the way, Eric. What's that?
I just had some caffeine, so I'm kind of like amped now.
All right, rock on.
If you haven't been able to tell. So much so I have to look down and make sure I pressed record on the recorder. Okay.
You are recording, right?
Yes. We are about a minute and change in so far, so we're good. We are clear. We can keep going. My question to you.
My answer to you.
Did you watch anything this weekend, Doug?
As a matter of fact, I did watch something this past weekend.
Yo, Doug, what did you watch this weekend?
This weekend, I watched the Christopher Nolan tour de force ensemble piece known as Oppenheimer. Did you watch anything this weekend?
Not this weekend. Last night.
But what did you watch last night?
I went to go catch, by myself, a late night showing of Barbie.
Well, this just sounds so ridiculous. I love it.
I don't
In
know
case
if
you
it's
haven't figured out by now, listeners, but yeah, we were kind of, we telegraphed this one a little bit earlier, but yeah, this past weekend. Yeah, so if you add Eric and I together, you get a Barbenheimer. Is that what people are calling this shit?
I guess so, but we watched them in the backwards order. So from what I've been told is if you want to watch Barbenheimer, most people were going to watch Barbie, then Oppenheimer, but really there's no specific order. So
in that case, we did Never mind.
Yeah, you see, it doesn't work the other way around. So
No, not really.
it really doesn't matter which order you watch them in, so long as you fulfill the meme, and then you're good to go.
Yeah.
I have to lean away so I don't burp in the microphone. Excuse me.
It's all good.
Oh man. So you went to Oppenheimer, right?
Yes, that is correct.
You sat through what, over 3 hours, or was it less than 3 hours?
It was tough to exactly ballpark out, but with credits, I think it's a hair over 3 hours. I want to say like maybe 3 hours, 10 minutes if you count the credits.
Okay. Before we get into Oppenheimer,
Okay.
I know we're getting like right into it, but any good trailers before your movie?
Oh no, they all suck balls. You know what? The funny thing was, I haven't been to a movie in a while that really sucked in the trailers that badly, and so it felt like there was like 6 of them. I remember exactly one trailer, just because it seemed like such a colossally stupid idea. Do you remember that nonsense from, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, when a bunch of speculators and hedge fund managers were trying to make the GameStop stock bomb?
Yes.
They made a movie about it.
Did they make a movie? Because I thought they made a documentary about it as well.
No, this is a movie. They may have made a documentary as well, but there's definitely a movie. It's coming out sometime, I think, in September.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, I just remember looking at the person I was with and said, "That's fucking stupid." But that's me. I was like, "What, really?" I mean, not to dwell and dawdle too long on anything, because we have a lot of stuff to cover this evening. But I think back. In fact, I think I even just ran through my head in the movie theater very briefly that I couldn't help but think of the stories of how in Hollywood there are just rooms at the studios full of scripts just sitting there collecting dust, and they made a movie about that.
Yeah, the IP pool has run dry. I remember reading an article a long time ago. I can't remember what it was. It could have been like Electronic Gaming Monthly, or maybe like Hollywood Entertainment, Entertainment Magazine, where they say that in general, Hollywood doesn't want to touch something unless they could see a franchise out of it. Meaning, if they can get 2 to 3 films, hopefully. So nowadays, they're just trying to cash in on whatever they can find that's the hot button topic. So the whole meme stock, as it was called, because I believe it was GameStop, AMC Theaters, Bed Bath & Beyond. There was a few other stocks that were included as well, where I guess the stock bros were going on Reddit, and they were like trying to figure out which ones that they can manipulate, which ones they can they can move around a little bit. And it became so infamous that now it's become a topic for films. So I was like, wow, okay, that's yeah, I agree with you. There's so many different ideas out there, and really cool ideas that are just sitting in a corner of some Hollywood office that's not being touched. It's probably been read once or twice. It's probably been passed around. They were like, yeah, it's pretty good, but they're just leaving it there because there's no guarantee that that's going to be a hit. There's no guarantee that's going to be something that they can, leverage into multiple sequels. So because of that, we're stuck with what we're getting. But getting back to the films that we did watch this past week or weekend, Oppenheimer, standalone film. I mean, it is based on historical events, but there's no prequel, there's no sequel, as far as I know, that's going to be happening out of this. I don't know.
We'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, you gotta go ahead.
Wait. Did the Avengers show up in the end of Oppenheimer?
Well, no. Theoretically, you can make a sequel out of the race to build the hydrogen bomb. But
yes, no, that's a different story. Yes, yes. For a second, I thought you were going to tell me yes, the Avengers did show up. But
Captain America totally punched Oppenheimer in the fucking face.
There you go. But in the case of Barbie, also another standalone film, although they're saying that they might want to squeeze another one out, but Greta Gerwig was saying, I really don't know how to approach a sequel for this film after the first one. Like there is no idea for one. I don't know where to start. And really, in this case, you probably should leave it alone. I know last week we read off a list of the many different properties. And again, I don't put much stock into that list. It's just different ideas that could potentially become films for Mattel. But I did read an article, again, I believe this one was, I want to say it was Variety.
Okay.
Where the success of Barbie can potentially open the doors for other story ideas to come to light regarding toys or board games. That idea that if it's made correctly, where it would connect with audiences, you could get something through. And I don't disagree. I still love the idea, and this is not for Mattel, but for Hasbro. Even though they had Battleship, and we talked about that one last time, where Battleship was just a pile of crap.
Mm-hmm.
If they approach it correctly, and if they do it correctly, a movie about Candyland in the style of like Lord of the Rings could be kind of cool. If you let's say, what was that?
I thought you were going to say like a horror movie.
No, I still say Magic 8 Ball would make a great horror movie.
Or Don't Wake Daddy.
That's a good one. I like that one. As a horror movie.
I can't take credit for that. I saw somebody made fake movies out of board games, and that was one of them they put on there, and they made it look like a horror movie.
Okay. If you take the idea of Wizard of Oz and Lord of the Rings and have that be the foundation for Candyland,
mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure you can pull out maybe 2 movies, possibly 3, because let's face it, Hollywood loves trilogies.
Yep.
So you could possibly make something really, really cool out of that if it's done correctly and if they get the right budget. It doesn't have to be extremely high. Look, the 2 movies that we watched this past weekend, we talked about it before, $100 million budgets each. Radically different movies, but you can do it. And both are pretty successful at the box office right now. So, what was the one story I was reading? So there's on YouTube, there's a channel called The New Rockstars. Bunch of talking heads. They review movies. They do Easter eggs. One of the guys on there, his name is Eric Voss. I like his breakdowns. He's very smart, very high energy. Fun stuff to watch every now and then. In fact, I've made it a point that whenever a new movie comes out, I'll look for their breakdowns just because I'm curious of what I might have missed that they caught. I don't have the time and resources to make breakdown videos like they do, so the fact that they get a chance to do them, I love that they're what they do.
Okay.
But Eric Voss has a running theory, and I don't know if it's his specifically, but he's brought it up a couple different times, where every movie or every story is either trying to be Citizen Kane or The Wizard of Oz. And the stories that we watched this, past weekend, Barbie obviously is leading into Wizard of Oz, and Oppenheimer is leading into Citizen Kane. I love the fact that those are like foundational themes for these movies. So it's something to look at next time I watch a movie, like what's it really trying to be and where does it lean into? But that being said, tell me about your adventure to Oppenheimer. What did you like? What didn't you like overall?
Okay, so get comfy. This is going to take a little bit.
I got my soda. I'm leaning back. Go for it.
Okay, so Oppenheimer, as previously mentioned, you're talking about, if you take out the closing credits, you might shave it down to 3 hours on the nose. There's a lot of movie here, but there's also a lot of information there. So the movie has 3 different narratives going on that it kind of bounces in between, and they're all kind of telling the same story from different avenues and at different time periods. So the first story, and I don't know if anyone saw this in the trailer, part of it's in black and white, which right off the bat I saw that and I was like, oh, this movie's checking a lot of boxes for me. So the black and white segments take place in, I think it's like 1958 or 1959. It's at a Senate hearing to confirm a fellow by the name of Louis Strauss to a cabinet position under the Dwight Eisenhower administration. I want to say Secretary of Commerce. Louis Strauss was a businessman. He was a rear admiral in the U.S. Navy, not in a military capacity. I think he was more like handled supply and logistics and stuff like that. And at one point in time, he was one of the higher ups in the Atomic Energy Commission. So this entire meeting is going down as he's trying to get confirmed to this to the cabinet post, which he wants. And meanwhile, along the way, he's basically telling stories about some stuff he's speaking with his aides, talking about like what they're expecting to happen during the hearings. Interspersed with this are meetings of a group of people in a very uncomfortable, small, claustrophobic room, where they're talking about whether or not they should be revoking J. Robert Oppenheimer's security clearance. I believe they said Q clearance, which I think that's like the highest level security clearance available in the U.S. Government. And basically, they're just trying to figure out if the man should have his clearance revoked because he has quote unquote communist and socialist sympathies. Interspersed with this is the actual story of Oppenheimer's life, starting with his time, I believe, at Cambridge studying physics, and finding out he's really, really bad at lab work, but he is really, really fucking good at theoretical parts. So you want him to work theory, you're in good shape. You actually want him to stick him in the lab, you're asking for trouble.
Okay.
So from there, it basically bounces around as he's traveling between all these different hotspots around Europe in the 1920s, studying physics at different places between England, Germany, France, all over the place, eventually earning his doctorate. I think it was in theoretical physics, but I don't remember exactly. And eventually he makes his way to, I think it was University of California, Berkeley. And from there he starts teaching. He basically builds his way up, comes up with a couple of good ideas, working with other physicists and other people. Meanwhile, interspersing that with, apparently the guy was a womanizer, which I never knew. So, yeah, it's him basically fucking around with a couple of different women, one of which he meets through meetings of the United States Communist Party. And eventually he ends up boning her for a while, but eventually he ends up marrying another woman who he kind of sort of steals from another physics professor, if I remember correctly. I might have missed a couple of pieces because this movie whips a lot of information at you.
Yeah, you had to condense a lot of stuff into 3 hours. There's a reason why it's 3 hours.
Well, honestly, there were two major games I was playing during this movie. The first game was, who the fuck is that actor? They look really familiar and they sound really familiar. No less than in this movie, you've got Cillian Murphy, you've got Matt Damon, you've got Robert Downey Jr., you've got Florence Pugh, you've got, who else did I catch along the way? Names that really jumped out at me. Oh, bloody hell, I'm banking on his, Josh Hartnett. He shows up in the movie.
Nice.
Oh, good God, I'm blank. Bloody hell, I'm having a hell of it. Who was the guy who played Commissioner Gordon in the Christopher Nolan Batman movies? Gary Oldman.
Okay.
Yeah, he plays President Truman. Didn't even realize it was him.
Nice.
Yeah, so literally, like, there's so many. So a lot of the movie, like I said, I was like, who is that actor? They look really familiar. And the rest of the time was, okay, I know that guy, that physicist, okay. I know that guy. Okay, that's Edward Teller. That guy is Leo Szilard. Okay, there's Enrico Fermi. I'm not sure who who that Lawrence guy is. I'm not sure who that guy is. I'm not sure who that guy is. Oh, that's supposed to be Niels Bohr. Oh, that's Hans Botha. So I was just like ripping through it because I've read a couple of different accounts of the Manhattan Project over the years. Never read the source material for this book, which was or for this movie, which was a book called Oppenheimer, the American Prometheus, which came out, I think, about 15, 16 years ago. So, yeah, basically, and I mean, you pretty much know the bare bones of the entire affair. You know, he gets tapped, World War II breaks out, he gets tapped to head the Manhattan Project. He convinces them all to build this city out in the middle of nowhere so they can very carefully control security because they were terribly worried about espionage, not just from the Germans, but also from the Soviets, who technically we were allies with, but it was a very uncomfortable alliance, if you will. So, of course, the entire time they're working on this entire thing, they're trying to figure out how to get it done. They're trying to figure out how to assemble everything. They're constantly having conflict over what's the best way to achieve this. You know, which route should we take? How do we handle this? How do we do this? And then, of course, the biggest questions come in the spring of 1945 when news gets back that Hitler was dead and the German army surrendered and the war in Europe was over. So, of course, the question was, do we keep on doing this? And at that point in time, it becomes even more conflicted because one of the best lines that I thought summed up the entire point of the thing was Oppenheimer, who was Jewish, says, "I don't know if the United States should have the atomic bomb, but I definitely know that Germany should not have it," which is a quite telling line.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, eventually from there you move on. And one of the things I liked about the movie, well, it was a horror movie in the sense that I think way back when in 2019, we talked extensively about the Chernobyl miniseries that was on HBO.
Yep.
In years since then, I've come to realize that that was one of the best pieces of horror I have seen because it just leaves you feeling uneasy the entire time. Oppenheimer does the same thing to me.
Really?
Yeah, there was just this. I found myself, I was just chewing on my fingers the entire fucking movie.
Oh, jeez.
Like, I just felt on edge the entire time, especially when they're talking about a lot of the different stuff. Like, at one point in time, like, literally they said, like, well, theoretically, if we detonate this thing, if we do achieve fission and this and this and this happen, there's a possibility we could ignite the atmosphere of the planet on fire and destroy the whole planet. And one of the reoccurring, I don't want to call it a joke, but it's kind of repeated numerous times, is one of the physicists runs all the calculations for it and goes through everything and effectively says, well, I figured it out. The chances of that happening are near zero. And to which everybody just looks at them and says, near zero? And they're like, well, what do you want? It's theory. And they're like, zero would be nice.
I believe that moment was one of the trailers.
Yeah, when Oppenheimer tells it to U.S. Army General Leslie Groves, who was played by Matt Damon. And yeah, basically when they're sitting there like an hour or two before the test was going to happen. Oh yeah, and they did capture the entire scene where they were taking bets on what the yield would be on the bomb, like how powerful it would it be a complete dud, and exactly what would happen. So I can't remember the one physicist's name, but he was a fellow New Yorker who was friends with Oppenheimer, who figured out, I think the yield of the bomb was something like 16 or 17 kilotons. So yeah, they're going through all of that, and then eventually, of course, the war ends. 1949, the Soviet Union tests their own atomic bomb. I believe it was later revealed that one of the guys who worked on the Manhattan Project eventually did turn out to be working for the Soviets and took back some of the information to them, which gave them a giant leap forward because nobody was expecting the Soviet Union to come up with a bomb that quickly. But lo and behold, they did. So, and from there, there's a lot of back and forth. They bounce around an awful lot. Yeah, basically they kind of sort of fuck Oppenheimer over. He loses his security clearance. He kind of, I don't want to say goes into exile, but he basically goes to the U.S. Virgin Islands, and he basically just spends all of his time hanging out on the beach and spending time with his wife and some of his kids. And eventually he does kind of and he would come back to the States periodically to lecture on physics at different universities around the way. But for the most part, he was just done with it. He was just, I've got nothing to do with this anymore.
Wow.
Eventually, during the Kennedy administration, he comes back and he accepts like a few awards for his contributions to atomic research and basically doing his part, which, and you get the point too. In 1942, when they started the project, and I think it was like spring, summer 1942, Germany was at the height of its power. Like, France had fallen, Denmark had fallen, Italy was on their side. Spain was technically neutral, but General Francisco Franco, he was in bed with the fascists in the form of Mussolini and Hitler. Switzerland said we got nothing to do with nothing. Poland was gone, and they were right around and Germany was coming up on the point where they were getting ready to launch Operation Barbarossa, which was a full invasion of the Soviet Union. And you got to realize they ripped through those Western republics like Belarus, Ukraine, Estonia, all of those. They went through them like they weren't even there. Like, they just ripped through those areas with the Blitzkrieg to the point where they actually split the force, and they had one bunch heading towards Moscow, which fortunately never got there, and the other bunch that was heading towards Stalingrad, the former Volgograd, which was on the Volga River, realizing that if they were able to do that and cut the country off, that gave them access to the Caucasus Mountains, which would give them all the oil, gas, and coal that they needed to fuel the war effort. So between that and realizing that Britain was pretty much on the ropes, I think that was right around the time of the the Battle of Britain was going on, and England was not winning the air war. So there was a very, very major point in time where they said, we don't know which way this is going to go, so we got to play every fucking possibility. And that's kind of what fueled, like, I mean, now we can look back and say that was probably a very, very bad idea in the long run, but given the situation, they were making the best decision they could off of the information they had.
Yeah.
But getting back to it before I get too much in geeking out with history shit, it is a fucking beautifully shot movie. It just, like, there's so many shots where I was like, I haven't bought a DVD now in about 2 years. I'm planning on buying this one on Blu-ray when it comes out.
Nice. Okay.
Because it just looks so good. Like whoever, like, I mean, Nolan can shoot very well, but I mean, this one really, really goes above and beyond the Call of Duty. And yeah, there's a lot of the shots they use. You only see one atomic explosion in the movie, and that's the Trinity test when they tested the bomb in July of '45. And they did that with conventional explosives and some practical effects and forced perspective, from what I read.
Now, what was the location of that one again? Was that
what the
Trinity test? Yeah.
Oh, that was in New Mexico. Alamogordo? No, not Alamogordo. I can't remember the name. I want to say it was near Alamogordo. It was basically out in the middle of nowhere on a giant, not peninsula, on what's a giant mesa? Is that a giant flat thing?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. So it was out in the middle of nowhere there. Although it should also be said that they basically, the area where they built the town. Yeah, in the movie they kind of said, it's like, well, the area is uninhabited. I was like, no, there was a couple of indigenous tribes there. Y'all basically said, get the fuck out.
Yeah.
So, but there was that was one mark I can give against them when I was reading up on the film, and then they're like, yeah, well, yeah, it's not going to be perfect, but yeah, they should have definitely thrown that in the movie and been like, yeah, well, they're not heroes. It's a matter of fact, not anything else. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things that's often overlooked. And again, there's so much going on to try to cram that in there. Again, based on a true story. So some things might be, certain people might have been merged into one character. A certain time events might have been switched around here or there, or whatever the case is. I don't know how closely they followed the actual historical events, but from everything that I've heard so far, I haven't seen it. I'm hoping to catch it in the theater before it leaves, because I do want to see it on a big screen. But so far, everything I've been hearing, it's just been really, really well done. And again, if you're a Nolan fan, for the visuals, it just looks amazing. And then again, if you're a historical buff, as you are yourself, it sounds like you had a great time.
Oh yeah, there was one point where I kind of checked my clock just to see how deep we were. I thought we'd been in the theater for maybe a half hour. We were about an hour 15 in.
Nice.
And that's the other thing I'll give it. For a 3-hour movie, it moves. Like, it keeps the information moving along. So, yeah, it's very well done. I'm looking forward to watching it again and doing a little bit more, kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of it. It's kind of fallen out of favor, but I'm really hoping they really load up the DVD with, like, give me some commentary tracks, give me some making of stuff, give me some behind-the-scenes stuff. I don't know if this is the movie for it, but I'll even take a fucking blooper reel.
Okay.
So overall, I would give this a pretty damned high score. I know a few people kind of got annoyed that it kind of went less for the narrative and more for the historical record, which I'm completely fine with. I love that. But I know I have at least one friend who went to go see it and she loved it, but she said that was one thing that kind of knocked off a little bit for her. And but yeah, like I said, overall, I think it was an absolutely wonderfully made fucking movie, and yeah, it just captures. I mean, that entire era. I mean, going from World War II, not sure if fascism was going to take over a good chunk of the world, to a few years later wondering if communism was going to take over a good chunk of the world, and you're talking about, especially the era of Stalin, you're talking about a very authoritarian form of it. So it captures all of that and not knowing well. Later on, one of the big conflicts in the movie is one of the guys who worked on the Manhattan Project, a guy by the name of Edward Teller. He kept pitching the idea of they kept referring to as a super bomb, which would have been do you know anything about fission or fusion?
I'm sorry?
Do you know anything about fission or fusion?
Only what I remember from Chernobyl.
Okay, that's all you need. I don't know much of anything. I'm a layman. I've never even taken a physics course. But so the atomic bomb works off the theory of fission. They release the power from the splitting of the atom.
Hmm.
So one of the theories that was come up with is, what if we could build a fusion bomb? We can release a hell of a lot more energy, but it's very difficult to fuse atoms together. So they came up with, well, what if we used the fission bomb, created the necessary heat, and then generated a fusion reaction out of that? And that's basically kind of the source. That's the source material for the hydrogen bomb, which from there you're going an order of magnitude greater in terms of explosive power. Most atomic bombs, you're talking about, let's see, the I believe the Hiroshima bomb clocked in at about 18,000 tons of TNT. Your standard hydrogen bomb, you're talking megatons. You're talking millions of tons of TNT. So that's a pretty significant jump in terms of your destructive power you're dealing with. And one of the later questions was Edward Teller, who was the father of the hydrogen bomb, kept going on saying, if the Soviets have the atomic bomb, we need to start working on the hydrogen bomb so we can get the leg up on them. And Oppenheimer just looks at him and says, all you're doing is building a weapon that's going to make genocide even easier than it already is.
Yeah,
and unfortunately,
that's terrifying.
oh yeah, this is the kind of shit. If you think about this too hard, you're just going to want to dive to the bottom of a bottle of hard liquor. But the thing was, and all of it was kind of a moot point, because by 1952, both the United States and the USSR detonated hydrogen bombs. And then once you get to the point where we started perfecting intercontinental ballistic missiles, well, yeah, the gun is loaded, the hammer is cocked, and it's pointed right at the temple of the human race. So, and that's where we've been since then.
Okay, I have a few questions for you.
Shoot.
First question. The poison
Yes.
apple story. What was that about?
Okay, so the poison apple, there's a scene right in the beginning when it shows Oppenheimer in a lab working on an experiment and just fucking up left and right. And him even saying, he was like, "Oh my God, I'm terrible in the lab. I belong, I am," basically saying like the guy works more in theoreticals rather than in practice. So at one point, I believe I'm trying to remember. I want to say the tutor's name was Carroll. I think this is at his time at Cambridge in the United Kingdom. So at one point, everybody's leaving to go to a speech by Niels Bohr, who was a renowned physicist at the time. And so everybody clears out of the lab, including the instructor, who Oppenheimer was kind of pissed off at because the instructor kind of shit-talked Oppenheimer a little bit. And so in the movie, what he does is he goes over, he finds a thing of, I forget the type of poison, but he basically takes a syringe, takes a load of it, and injects it directly into the apple, and then leaves it on the guy's desk.
Oh, God.
Later on in the movie, the instructor, Niels Bohr, and Oppenheimer find themselves back in the lab, and they're all talking, and Niels Bohr actually picks up the apple, and he's about to take a bite out of it, and Oppenheimer snatches it out of his hand, throws it in the garbage, and said, "There was a worm on it."
Okay.
So yeah, and apparently, yeah, even Oppenheimer's family has come out and said, "Yeah, that's horseshit. That never happened." So
Yeah, that was the story that came out. It's like, that's very accusatory. That probably should not have been included in the story itself or in the movie. But again, for dramatic effect in the film, it was probably what they wanted early on. The other story, or the other question I had for you, the Florence Pugh scene.
the sex scene?
Yes. Was that as awkward as everybody is making it out to be?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oppenheimer does. So it's interesting because Cillian Murphy, he does not. I don't know what they did to him, because he's a good looking guy. I don't know what they did to him to make him look so like weird. Like if it was like a makeup effect or just how they dressed him or if he dropped weight for it, but he just looked kind of off the entire movie. But I think they were trying to make him look like Oppenheimer. And Oppenheimer, like he looked like kind of like a frail guy to begin with. So at one scene, Florence Pugh is at a meeting of the U.S. Communist Party, and she's kind of being like a little bit verbally playful slash combative with Oppenheimer, and they ended up doing the deed. Florence Pugh was playing a woman. I think her name was Jean Tatlock. She was a biologist, member of the U.S. Communist Party, on again, off again, relationship person, spouse, or not spouse, but I'm trying to think of the proper word. Like she had like an off again, on again, off again relationship with Oppenheimer. It was very tense, kind of weird. So
Like a mistress?
they're having sex, maybe, kind of, sort of, yeah.
Okay.
And very combative with each other as taken in the movie. I don't know how true that one is. I haven't had a chance to look into that one yet. And so she's going through his bookshelf, and in addition to being very good at physics, Oppenheimer also loved different languages. I think he spoke like 5 or 6 of them. And she pulled a book of Sanskrit off his shelf, which was the Bhagavad Gita, and just opens it up, and she basically holds up the book as she strangles him, and they start, doing the deed. And, and it's like, what does this say? And he starts basically explaining the text, and she's like, no, just read it. And that's when he reads the line, I am become death, destroyer of worlds, which he famously also said after the successful detonation of the A-bomb. And yes, Florence Pugh is quite lovely, but it was just it was kind of an awkward scene.
Well, that in of itself, having a woman straddle you while holding the Bhagavad Gita and reading that line, when the bomb went off, he pretty much says, and now we're fucked.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, that's kind of like a nice wraparound, although I don't know if that was the intention, but I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm just drawing the simple line. That's it. That's very surface analytics, but I'll take it.
Works for me, Haas.
The other question I have for you is, how far in before they actually have the Trinity explosion take place?
It's pretty deep into the movie. I think it's maybe no less than 2 hours in, no more than like 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay.
Because they do spend an awful lot of time having additional conversations where they finish up. Just to put a button on it, of course, Oppenheimer loses the security clearance. Louis Strauss ends up not being confirmed to the Secretary of Commerce role, thanks to some other physicists who were basically pissed off at how he kind of fucked over Oppenheimer, because there was some bad blood between the two due to a couple of different things over the course of the story. There was like some testimony that that Oppenheimer gave at this one meeting that made Louis Strauss look like kind of like an idiot, and Louis Strauss was very good at holding a grudge. I don't know if this was made up for the movie or not, and I'll try not to get too deep into it, especially because there's a spoiler I don't want to give away for the film, for one of the better lines in the film. But at one point in time, Louis Strauss even suspects Oppenheimer of speaking poorly about him to Albert Einstein when they're both together in Princeton, New Jersey.
Okay.
But yeah, so Louis Strauss doesn't get that position, effectively ending his career in Washington. And I actually even read that effectively ended his time in politics. And after that, he basically just went into retirement. But he always held a grudge against Oppenheimer for the rest of his days until he died, I think, in the mid-'70s.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of moving pieces here.
I like I said, I definitely want to catch this one before it leaves theaters. It sounds like really cool. Everything that I've been reading about it, all the different things. Again, I know you said spoilers, but really, it's historical events.
Well, just for how well there's a couple of lines that kind of call back to the beginning of the movie and then kind of reference forward, and the way they all work together, it kind of puts everything together very nicely. It's oddly enough, when I was watching the movie, there was actually a line from the Avengers that popped into my head that I thought about for a minute. In the way back 11 years ago, in the first Avengers movie, do you remember the scene where they're all aboard the helicarrier, and it comes out that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s been developing weapons based on Hydra designs, which also incorporate, I think, the Tesseract?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, basically, everybody's like, what are you doing? Why are you messing with this technology? Even Thor just looks at them all and says, all this is doing is telling the universe that the Earth is ready for a higher form of warfare.
Yeah.
And that I don't know why that line kept popping in my head when I was watching this, because chemical weapons are one thing. They're still relatively localized. Biological weapons were still remarkably crude in the form of, spraying stuff on people or giving them something infected with something. But atomic weapons. I mean, you're playing at such. There's another good scene I'll bring up before I'll try to cap this off. Rather than whatchamacallit, actually show the pictures themselves, which are quite ghastly. There's a scene where a lot of the scientists who worked on the Manhattan Project, they're all sitting in a room and they're watching a slideshow. And the slideshow are pictures that were taken by the U.S. military of the aftermath of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And they don't show you the screen at all, so you don't actually see the pictures. And they're you can find them online quite easily. They're quite ghastly, and they're not easy to look at, of all the people with all these horrifying burns. But basically, the way the camera is set in the movie, it's just showing their reactions to the slides, and you just see them all sitting there with these looks on their faces, like, "What have we fucking done?" Yeah, like you see some people cringing, and you see people just having this look on their face, like they're just like kind of just in a state of shock.
Yeah,
because when you realize that, like, I mean, it's one thing when this is all on a piece of paper or it's in the desert and there's nobody nearby, but when you're actually seeing, elderly people or women or children, with, skin falling off their hands,
yeah,
or burn patterns on their body from like how like, the flash burns penetrated their fucking clothing and left like grid burns all over them, or, seeing people like, seeing 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds basically, pictures of them like in advanced stages of radiation poisoning, just fucking waiting to die. It's horrifying shit.
Yeah, it's very, very sobering. Like when you see it like that. I remember being a child and asking my brother about the atomic bomb because I remember where I heard it from initially, whether it be it from a comic book or from a TV show, whatever the case was. And my brother was trying to explain to me just the horror of the aftermath. And me as a child, I was trying to wrap my head around it, and it wasn't until much later when I realized what he was telling me. I'm like, wow, like their skin literally was like just falling off. If they go to like try to remove their shirt, they're removing the skin with the shirt. Like there was, yeah, it was terrifying. So yeah, absolute horror. But that all reminds me of the line from Jurassic Park. They were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they never thought if they should.
Well, that one, I agree, but I disagree with that one. I think that one comes down to the point where, at one point you've heard the name Werner Heisenberg before, correct?
Yes.
He was like a world-class physicist. He was working for the Germans during the war. So one of the issues with that is, and this is what really terrified them, and keep in mind, like, even by like 1940 standards, they dumped a couple of $1 billion into this project. I think I read somewhere if you converted this over, I think they spent the equivalent of like $40 billion on this by today's currency.
That's crazy.
But you got to realize something too. During the war, the Germans already had V-2 rockets, which weren't super accurate, but they could hit a city with the things. They didn't have to depend on bombers, which bombers, you could have a chance of knocking them out of the sky with your anti-aircraft. If the Germans had invented one of these things and built it and strapped it to a V-2 rocket, it wouldn't take too many of those before London was completely gone. So in a sense, I think they were in a position where they felt like, if we can't take this chance, we can't let them get this technology. And it wasn't until much later on in the film when I think they finally get British intelligence, I think, finally figured out it's like, okay, they were using a different method of development, so they're nowhere near where we thought they were. And right there, I'm sure theoretically there were some people saying it's like, well, we shouldn't be working on this anymore. But also at that point, you're also talking about the push and pull between the scientific community, the U.S. government, and the military. So yeah, shit's complicated, man.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Hindsight's 2020. Once you finally get to that point, you can't undo it. Now it exists. It's not like you can lock away the knowledge and nobody's ever going to access it again. Now we live in fear of a button being pressed, because if somebody presses it, I can't even speak the words tonight.
Retaliatory.
Thank you. A retaliatory action would be to press their button, which would launch the same attack. And then at that point, we're all screwed. And then that's the end of the world, in theory.
Yep.
So Yeah, no, I get it. I get the idea of the arms race itself, but it's just like letting it escalate like that and get to the point where it is. I mean, thankfully, the way the history worked out for our sake, it is what it is. I'd hate to be on the receiving end of that action and not having a response in any way whatsoever, and just pretty much say, well, we're fucked. So history is not pretty, but at the same time, it is what it is, and that's where we currently sit. So yeah, no, I definitely want to check it out because
Mm-hmm.
I want to see it fleshed out the way you just explained it. I am for the historical, the narrative so much, as your friend was talking about. I can, give or take for that one. Just give me the story as it happened, and I'll be satisfied. And this one sounds like a very tense story from start to finish. So, yeah, no, I'm happy you got a chance to watch it. Now you just made me more excited to try to go watch it before it leaves the theater.
No, I totally would. In fact, I was even talking about it with somebody else I know earlier in the week, and in a way, I feel like this was a movie made for me.
Really?
This hits on the kind of stuff that interests me. Like I said, like when I first heard they were doing this, I was on board like last June, I think, when I first heard when I first like heard about the teaser trailer for this one,
Mm-hmm.
or like they're working on a movie like this, and I was like, fuck yeah, give it to me. I mean, like it's a fascinating story to begin with, and it's all real, and this is an event that, I mean, this really helped shape, you could say that a lot of these events kind of like shape the history of everything from 1945 till 1989 when the Soviet Union collapsed. 1990, if you want to split hairs.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
No, I definitely got to go check it out. What did your date think of the movie?
Um, she liked it. She enjoyed it. She was, I sure afterwards we were kind of like hanging out talking. She already had her palate cleanser queued up and ready to go afterwards because yeah, there was a couple of times where I had to put the brakes on myself because I was like, oh, if you think that's fucked up, wait till you hear about this thing that happened in 1980 fucking five. And I just started like trying to, and like I was about ready to just like, I will vomit to you all the most horrifying things you've ever heard of about all this history because this is what lives in my head constantly. And at a certain point, she was like, could you not? And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to stop now. Let's go talk about something. let's talk about something different.
Oh boy. Well, I cannot explain or retell the story of Barbie quite as detailed as you did for Oppenheimer. In fact, I will not. But I will say this: Barbie was a fun movie, a lot more fun than I ever could have given it credit for. The idea overall is that Barbie lives in a Barbie land. When they ask in the movie itself, what is Barbie land? Is it like a parallel dimension or like an alternate universe? The ultimate answer is yes. Barbie land exists almost like another area on the globe, just that we can't find it unless you go through a very specific path to get to it. When we first visit Barbie land and you see Margot Robbie and all the other Barbies, they show, author Barbie, President Barbie, Nobel Peace Prize Barbie, Dr. Barbie, like every Barbie that you can think of is populating this land, along with all the different variations of Ken. It's very weird. They live in their dream houses, as far as the Barbies are concerned. The Kens, we really don't find out where they live until much later. That's a different story point. But Margot Robbie plays stereotypical Barbie. They even refer to it as that in the film. She's living the life. They're getting together. They're having girls' nights. Ken doesn't exist without Barbie looking his way, essentially. Without Barbie's attention, Ken's lost. He doesn't know what to do with himself. Gets to the point where they're having this dance party. Everybody's having fun. And then all of a sudden, stereotypical Barbie goes, hey, do you guys ever think about death? And everything grinds to a halt. And then she goes, I'm just like dying to keep dancing. And then they resume the party. But at this point, the following morning, what used to be, a dream to wake up in Barbie Land, a dream to wake up in this little plastic house with no stairs, by the way, just a pool slide from the bedroom all the way down to the pool outside. things start to go wrong. She starts realizing things a little bit different. The way they depict this, the easiest, is that they show at one point when she takes off her high heels and she goes from having, a posture where she's on the balls of her feet, she suddenly goes flat-footed and she doesn't know how to walk. She goes to one of the doctors, Dr. Barbie, and when she goes to show it, because she's terrified, she's embarrassed, she doesn't know what to say or do, she shows it to the other Barbies, and the Dr. Barbie just yells out, "Flat foot!" Like it's a horrible disease that you can get. She's embarrassed, she doesn't know what to do, she lifts up her skirt, she realizes she's got some cellulite going on, something's happening. She has to go visit Weird Barbie, which they call behind her back and to her face, apparently. Weird Barbie, played by Kate McKinnon, essentially is the Barbie that somebody played too rough with and just ended up all weird with hair all messed up, markings on her face, always sits and splits or whatever the case is. But apparently she has knowledge of the outside world, our world. And she tells stereotypical Barbie that to solve her problem, she has to choose. She either chooses the high heel and stays in Barbie land and life will be as she always knew it, or she picks up this ratty ass sandal and go to the real world and find out what's the problem. Stereotypical Barbie says, "I'll take the high heel." She goes, No. I was just giving you the illusion of a choice so you felt like you had some kind of control. No, you have to go to the real world. Just go. Sends her off into the real world. She has to find the little girl that essentially has been bonding with her in this weird way so that to break whatever, I don't know. They never really say whether it's a curse or a malady, whatever the case is, but something is happening between our worlds that's not playing out right. On her trip out to the real world, Ken hitches a ride. He's not supposed to, but he's lost without her. So finally she relents and says, "Fine, you can come with me. Just don't get in the way." They essentially get out there. They don't know what to do. They get arrested twice. Once for assaulting somebody when they slap her on the ass. And secondly, when they try to change clothes because they were wearing all neon inline skating clothes. When they find the new clothes to wear, they get arrested because they don't pay for the clothing. So that's twice to get arrested. They're trying to figure out what the hell's going on. When Barbie finds this little girl that she believes is having all these problems because she connects with her in a certain level, she can see the memories. So they're bonded in this weird way. Again, they really don't explain this portion of it. They just keep rolling with the story, which is kind of interesting. But in the meantime, Ken runs off and sees executives, mostly men, talking to one another, the way they portray themselves, the way they hand gestures, or the way they talk about their lives or their work. He goes to a library, learns about patriarchy and everything else. He starts collecting all these books. And at first he thinks that, horses are like the key to the world and running the world. He goes, "Oh, no. Men run the world here. It's different than Barbie Land." Huh. So
Okay.
he takes the knowledge of patriarchy and he goes back to Barbie Land. Meanwhile, Margot Robbie, or stereotypical Barbie, or, existential Barbie at this point, finds the little girl, but turns out it's not the little girl who had the issue with the doll. It's the little girl's mother, who just so happens to work at Mattel, because they do show the building of Mattel, to which Will Ferrell plays the CEO of Mattel in this movie, which they allude to at one point that maybe he might have been a Ken as well that escaped Barbie Land and now lives in this world. They make the joke when Barbie runs to Mattel and says, "Oh, I'd like to, before I go back into the box and go back to being Barbie, I'd love to meet the woman who runs the place." "Oh, that's funny. There is no woman who runs this place." "Oh, okay. I just assumed because in Barbie Land, we inspire all these women. We thought the world would be a different place. Are there any women that work here?" He goes, "Yeah, there was another one at one point in time, but so maybe we had two women at Mattel, but that was a long time ago." So they're playing up the idea that, men do run the company, do run the world as it was seen from the outside world, I guess. This all builds up to where Barbie realizes, oh shit, they just want to stick me back in a box. It's not going to solve anything. They're just going to pretty much mothball me. She runs. As she's running away in the building of Mattel, somehow she runs across a woman on the 17th floor in this weird kitchen setup. It looks like the kitchen of any old house that you might imagine back from the 70s or 60s. And she has a quick little chat with the lady. You come to find out the lady's name is Ruth. For anybody who doesn't know, Ruth Handler was the creator of Barbie.
Oh, okay.
They allude to the fact that her ghost has, for whatever reason, set up on the 17th floor and just exists there in Mattel.
Weird.
It's a very, yeah, they play very fast and loose with a lot of the little themes in this movie. But when Barbie finally finds the mother that she was having the problems with, and they, realize, okay, the mother was, losing touch with Barbie, was losing touch with her daughter. They used to play dolls together, and she wanted to try to rekindle that love. So rather than donate the dolls to Goodwill, she had decided to hold on to it. But every time she would play with the doll at that point, her thoughts got, more existential, more dreadful, more fearful. And that's what started the breakdown of Barbie in Barbie Land. So she goes, all right, fine. We'll solve this. We'll come back to Barbie Land. Everything will be fine. And everything should be good. They get back to Barbie Land, only to find out that Ken has now taken over.
Oh, weird. Okay.
Barbie Land is no longer Barbie Land. It becomes Kendom. He institutes all these different things. So where the Kens would all vie for Barbie's attention, now they've switched it around where all the Barbies now serve the Kens. They've essentially brainwashed them. So now they have to save all the individual Barbies by letting them know how strong they are, how courageous they are, how individualistic each one of them is and was, and how important they can be. And as each one of them gets reset, more or less, they realize, okay, we have to stop the Kens. How do we stop the Kens? Oh, easy. You make them jealous of one another. So they have this funny scene where Margot Robbie Barbie goes to Ken's house, which has now been dubbed the, Mojo Dojo Casa House, when he takes over Barbie's dream house.
Okay.
So he essentially steals her home, puts in big screen TVs with old school movies on there, like Goodfellas and Rocky and Godfather and everything else. Pictures of horses all over the place, saloon doors on the front. It becomes wacky, and he's wearing a fur coat and a headband. It's over the top craziness. Once they finally get together and they realize, okay, this is how we're going to get them to be jealous of one another. They're going to say, yeah, can we sit down and maybe you can play guitar for me? And he starts to play Matchbox 20's Push You Around.
Okay.
And he starts on the couch. He does the opening verse. All of a sudden it cuts to another scene that says 4 hours later, and he's still singing the same song. But now they're on the beach. And as the camera pulls back, you see that each Barbie has convinced their Ken to go to the beach to sing the same song. So it's just the chorus of Ken singing Push. They all look at one another, and as the Barbies nod, they get up and they walk to a different Ken. And as they do this, all the other Kens take notice and what the fuck's going on? They angrily play the song, but at one point they stop and they now realize that, well, no, I'm important. I'm the one in charge. Screw that Ken. So now they're going to fight. They fight on the day where they're supposed to vote to change the constitution of Barbie Land. Okay. They distract them long enough so they can have a little dance number and musical about being Ken. Which apparently, if you hear the story of the song that was written for the movie was written as a joke, but Ryan Gosling loved it so much that he put his own thoughts into it, and it became the song that's in the movie. It's a really catchy number. It's really funny. But that's long enough for them to be distracted so that the Barbies can take back Barbie Land.
Oh, okay.
While all this is going on, the CEO, played by Will Ferrell, and his executives make it back to Barbie Land and are trying to correct everything that's going on. Once the resolution happens, spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen Barbie yet, because it's not based on historical facts. At one point, they're going through, and finally Ken realizes that Ken doesn't have to be just Ken. Doesn't have to be Barbie and Ken. It can be, it's Barbie and it's Ken. So he realizes he can be an individual on his own without her. And then somebody points out, well, wait a minute, what's the end of this? What's her story? What does she get out of all this? And Will Ferrell's character says, she falls in love with Ken. That's her story. And one of the little girls goes, bullshit. That can't be her ending. Obviously, because this is a movie about women empowerment. So you can't have that be the final story, right? Mm-hmm. So we have this little weird moment that happens again where Ruth Handler's ghost shows up in Barbie Land. And they have this dialogue back and forth and essentially saying that, look, Barbie doesn't want to be the idea anymore. She wants to be out there the one making the ideas. So, spoilers for anybody who hasn't watched the movie yet. Stereotypical Barbie doesn't want to be a Barbie anymore. She wants to go into the real world. They make it a point when they go into the real world where they say they don't have any genitals. So Barbie doesn't have a vagina and Ken doesn't have a penis. They just have plastic blobs down there.
Oh.
When things are wrapping up, Ruth Handler's ghost and Barbie are talking, and she says, look, I don't give you permission to do whatever you want to do. You choose what you want to do. You tell me what you want to do. The closing moments of the movie is Barbie in the real world, all excited. The girl who played with her as a doll is now helping her go to some meeting or appointment, whatever the case is. And as they arrive, the last line of the movie, they're like, oh, what's she doing? Is it like some kind of executive meeting? Is this like some kind of like important event happening? And she walks up and then somebody asks her, can I help you? The closing line of the movie is, I'm here to see my gynecologist. And it's like, what the fuck?
Interesting. Okay.
I am not the person this movie was made for. I enjoy the movie for what it was. I enjoy the storytelling. I see what they're trying with the women empowerment. There's this one scene with American Ferrara, who plays the mother, who played with the Barbie, where she points out all the different difficulties it is to be a mom, a woman, just to live in the world in general, all the contradictory nonsense they have to deal with, being pretty but not too pretty, being skinny but not too skinny, just all the dread that you have to deal with being a woman, which society has pretty much brought on. But they also look at the flip side as far as Barbie, because Barbie's supposed to inspire, but at the same time, Barbie had an unhealthy expectations for certain women in the world, because everybody thought, oh, you have to be like Barbie, you have to be skinny and pretty and everything else. There's two sides of that coin, and where everybody lands on is a little bit different. I get all that. I enjoy the silliness of it. I enjoy the dance numbers. The cinematography for this is really well done. Greta Gerwig did an amazing job. One of my favorite lines in the movie is when you have Helen Mirren doing the narration, as she say, this is Barbie, this is her everyday life, or this is Ken, and this is what Ken does. At one point, Barbie is just destroyed and can't take it anymore, is about to give up, and she's just sitting there like almost like a doll sitting on the ground, very stiff and immovable. And she says, I feel ugly. And then you hear Helen Mirren's character, a note to the casting director, Margot Robbie is not the woman you want to cast to get this point across. Because even as she's sitting there with like less makeup and her hair's supposed to be messed up, like Margot Robbie's still a beautiful woman no matter what. You can't get around that fact. Even when you're trying to make her look ugly, she looks pretty as hell. So, right on the head for that one. But overall, I sat there and watched the whole thing, and then down a few seats to my right was a family of a mother, 2 or 3 daughters, and I don't know if it was a son or a boyfriend or a brother, but they all were dressed in pink. They all were having fun. The mother looked like very Barbie-like because she had, bleach blonde hair, nice jewelry and everything else, very pale complexion. I was just like, wow, like this movie is for you. This movie is right up your alley, but it's not just for you. Like, this movie can reach so many different people, and the funny moments of the movie are really well done. Like when Ryan Gosling wants to go surfing to show off to Barbie. He can't, because he can't surf and the waves are made of plastic. So let's face it. He bounces off the waves and lands on the ground, and then he gets into a fight.
The water's made of plastic?
Yes, it's all Barbie land. Everything is artificial.
Okay. All right, gotcha. Just making sure.
Let's put it this way. When they go to drink tea, they pretend to pour something into the cup. They lift the cup up and tilt it towards their mouth, but nothing comes out. It's very visible that nothing comes out. Meanwhile, when Barbie's in the real world and somebody offers her a glass of water, she goes to do the same thing. And when the water splashes her in the face, she goes, oh, that never happens. Silly moments like that. Or like I was saying, the Ken interaction between Simu Liu and Ryan Gosling's Kens, where they're both vying for Barbie's attention. At one point, Gosling is Beach Ken. And I don't remember what Simu Liu's Ken is supposed to be of, but there's different ethnicities for Ken. And he goes, oh, you don't even know how to beat. He goes, yeah, I'll beat you off. Yeah, I bet you can't beat me off. And at one point, like they're gonna have a fight between two Kens and one Ken. He's like, I'll beat both of you off. It becomes really silly, but it's played very well. I would recommend anybody to watch the movie. It's a fun, silly movie. Don't go in going like, oh, this is fucking stupid. It's really well done. Keep an open mind. It's silly. It hits all the points for if you're a collector of Barbies. They show all the different kinds of Barbies. They hit historical facts. They, the mentioning of Ruth Handler, Mattel, and everything else. They go for it. They go deep. And for that kind of deep diving, I give them a lot of credit. And I can see why it's currently killing at the box office, because it's a fun movie. It's again, not a sequel, not a prequel, not based of anything before. I mean, yes, there were animated Barbies and Barbie movies and like stage shows, but nothing like this. So the fact that this is doing so well, and the fact that it potentially opens the door for other IP as far as toys or board games and stuff like that, if it's done well, you can have a good story done. But if you try to rush it and just throw money at it, it'll solve the problem. It'll fall apart and be just like Battleship. So that's my take on Barbie. And yes, I waited to the very end to see if there was a post-credit scene, which I did read after the fact that they were going to try to pull a page out of Marvel's book. But a lot of different scenes were going to be made, and then they changed their mind. Some people were cast, but they didn't use it. So if it comes out on DVD, I hope they include those at the very least, along with different extra features, because there's a lot to be had. And it's another movie, kind of like you're saying you want to go back to watch Oppenheimer and get further into it.
Yeah.
Barbie, you could easily go back and catch it. You'll find new things a second or third viewing, because there's so much going on in the background. You're not going to catch it the first time around. So
okay.
It's a fun one. In fact, if you want to go out with your date, I don't know if your date would be into it, but I would recommend a viewing of Barbie because it is silly and fun.
All right.
And that's me. Like, I've had people tell me that, oh, it's very pro-feminist, and maybe they go a little too far with the empowering message. Like, how do you go too far? It's a movie. They're not ramming it down your throat. They're just having fun with it. The fact that Barbie has to try to go into the world, realize that the world is not what she thought it was, that Barbies actually had a negative effect in certain shapes or forms on the world, and then have to go back and battle a Ken that has taken on the patriarchy and used all the other Kens to take over. I never thought I'd see Ken as a villain, but it worked. It worked really well.
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
For some reason, the whole Mojo Dojo Casa House thing really got stuck in my head, and I see why people were saying it afterwards. So, I don't know. That's my take on Barbie overall.
Yeah, pretty cool. All right.
One last thing before we finish up for tonight. I did want to mention, I know we've been kind of avoiding the death cast, and we've had a lot of people pass away recently. A lot of people as of note, but we haven't been covering them because we just didn't want to have like a real downer note. Want to talk about the passing of one Mr. Paul Reubens. People might better know him as Pee-Wee Herman, who passed away recently, July 30th, at the age of 70 after a private battle with cancer. And all the stories that are coming out after his passing are very heartwarming, very heartbreaking. And it's amazing that for anybody who doesn't know, he put up with some nonsense from 91 to 98 or 99, I think it was, after he had a indecent exposure public incident happen, which kind of messed up his career for a good 8-9 years. But like all the different stories that are coming out, I remember when I was a kid watching Pee-Wee Herman, the Pee-Wee Herman Show on Saturday mornings. The craziness of his house and everything else, Pee-Wee's Playhouse, was just a lot of fun. Like everybody remembers Conky, Jambi, all the other characters. Lawrence Fishburne playing Cowboy Curtis. What was Phil Hartman's character on the show? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I can't remember either. In fact, I never made the connection it was Phil Hartman until Reubens' passing. Um, whatchamacallit, I didn't realize that number one, Paul Reubens was part of the Groundlings in Chicago,
Yes.
and that originally the original incarnation of Pee-wee's Playhouse, which was apparently a lot more adult oriented, Phil Hartman was writing with them. Like, I never knew any about that, so I was just like, oh wow, that's wild. So
Phil Hartman, Cassandra Peterson was with him in the Groundlings.
yes,
Better known as Elvira for those who don't know. All that comedic group came together. It was funny because I remember growing up watching Pee-wee's Playhouse, but then years later, I had a phase with a bunch of friends where we started watching Cheech and Chong movies, and Pee-wee shows up in 2 Cheech and Chong movies.
oh yeah,
One was Next Movie, which I believe that's where he's playing like I believe he was billed as Hamburger Dude. He looked like a mental patient, and he just kept going, hamburger. And then later on, I can't remember, I think it was Nice Dreams, Cheech and Chong's Nice Dreams, where Chong meets up with Cheech's cousin Red. They go to a comedy club, and Pee-wee Herman's trying to do his routine on stage, but they keep messing with him. He eventually gets pissed off and walks off stage. I was like, wait a minute. I grew up watching Pee-wee's Playhouse. What the fuck's he doing in a stoner movie?
it was pretty wild.
But that goes back to what you were saying, where the Pee-Wee Herman Show was adult oriented to the point where when he ran it, I can't remember where he was doing the show for a while. I think it was on Broadway and somewhere else. But he was doing late night shows for adults and early matinee shows for kids. So he had 2 different levels of the show that he would play. And I'm sure like the more risque stuff he'd save for late night. But how that parlayed into Pee-wee's Playhouse, and then he lived the character, because that ran for like what, 4 or 5 years, something like that?
Yeah, it was. Well, it definitely started in the late '80s, and I think I can't remember. I think the show was canceled right around the time he got the arrest in Florida for public masturbation.
Yes, which was apparently in an adult theater. It was a different time, folks. We didn't have Pornhub. we didn't have a cell phone where you can run off and do whatever you want to do in the privacy of your own home or whatever the case was. Back then, you wanted to go out, you probably go to an adult theater, do whatever you wanted to do. I say all that because a lot of people stood up for him at that time. I mean, yes, he went through shit and he was pretty much blacklisted for some time. It wasn't until the late 90s, early 2000s where he started showing up in different movies like Mystery Men or Blow with Johnny Depp. And at that point, he wasn't playing the Pee-wee character anymore. In fact, he stopped doing interviews as Pee-wee Herman because he was living the character for a while. So much so that when his parents were introduced on camera, rather than refer to them than their real names, he would refer to mom as Honey Herman and his father is Herman Herman. Living the gimmick, brother.
Hell yeah, man. Kayfabe.
But he did his absolute best, and he realized, hey, look, if this isn't going to work out, the Pee-wee character, apparently he auditioned for Saturday Night Live, and it was turned down.
Oh, okay.
So he said, screw it, I'm going to go do my own thing. And then that's where he borrowed some money, and that's what led to the creation of the Pee-wee Herman Show on the West Coast. Again, we're using his Groundling background, using his Groundling co-comedians or co-workers or friends, and they developed that show together. Phil Hartman, I can't remember the name of the other gentleman. I think I have it. Let's see if I can find it real quick. But yeah, it's funny to see how he went from that, and then let's not forget to mention he hit it big in movies besides Cheech and Chong. That was separate. Pee-wee's Big Adventure, directed by Tim Burton. Another story that came out that apparently, had Tim Burton not done that film, he didn't know where his career would be today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he credits Pee-wee Herman with a lot of, him getting started. We think about Tim Burton being, this gothic-minded, creepy, kooky kind of guy who makes all these weird Halloween-themed movies. If you watch Pee-wee's Big Adventure, there's certain little Tim Burton-esque moments here and there, but that was like his big break because Pee-wee's Big Adventure was wildly successful.
Yes.
The follow-up movie, Pee-wee's Big Circus, or that was Pee-wee's Big Top. I can't remember which one. So it's a circus-themed movie because Pee-wee himself had a love of the circus growing up, but that one unfortunately did not do as well. But in 2000, was it 2010? Oh God, it's been a while now. He did another movie for Netflix. I'm trying to remember what the name of that one was. I don't remember off the top of my head. Going back to the other groundling, I think it was, if I remember, this is the gentleman, John Paragon was the other one who helped him out in writing the show for Pee-wee, the Pee-Wee Herman Show.
And he was also on the show. Yeah.
Yes. I'm trying to look real quick, see what's going on.
He was Zombie the Genie.
Was that Phil Hartman?
Oh, no, I thought you meant John Paragon. I'm sorry.
Oh, was it? I'm not sure. I wasn't. I never actually looked into who the Zombie was.
No, a fun fact. John Paragon, he was Zombie the Genie. And he was also Cassandra Peterson's Elvira's writing partner as well.
Oh.
Yeah, because he just passed away, I think, like a year or two ago.
No shit.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that floating head always fucking creeped me out. But everybody loved it, because even to this day, if you say it to somebody, like, I remember that. Mecca lecca high, mecca honey ho. It's stuck in everybody's mind, and everybody would say it every now and then, and it's just one of those catchphrases that became synonymous with the show. The movie I was referring to on Netflix was Pee-wee's Big Holiday in 2016, which I remember hearing rumors about it, and everybody was talking about it, like, oh, Pee-wee's getting a big movie, get together. Joe Manganiello at one point was like helping out with it as well, and I think they had like a bunch of different cameos. I don't know if it's still on Netflix. It's probably worth checking out, and if Netflix is smart, they'll probably put it back up there in honor of him. And let's face it, I'm sure they would like the ratings as well, because everything that's going on with the strike currently. But it's unfortunate that we lose Mr. Reubens after a private battle, because most people would say, oh, let's put a statement out, or let's talk about this, let's raise awareness. No, he kept it to himself, and he didn't want to make a big fuss about it. And they even put a big statement out there that, saying that I'm sure people will talk about this afterwards, but it was an honor and a joy for me to be able to create art and entertain you. Thank you. To which I was like, fuck, man, really? There was a story of one of the talk shows where one of the crew members, I don't know if it was an intern backstage who was helping out, like get him a coffee or get him a drink or make sure he was comfortable before his interview. I might have been on Letterman, where Pee-wee or Mr. Reubens took a liking to the guy and said, would you like to come over to my house for some time? We'll check out some stuff. And the guy really didn't know what to make of it and thought that was kind of weird, but took up Pee-wee on his offer. And when he showed up to his place, apparently just hung out. They watched videos. He showed him some props from different projects they worked on, and then, fed him, gave him something to drink, and they parted ways. But from that point on, Pee-wee would always send him like holiday cards, birthday cards, never missed one, and just kept in touch.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of the different stories. I have to mention Mr. Rob Paulson, famous voice actor, who once he got to meet Pee-wee, he said he never once missed a Christmas card from him. He has a Christmas card from Pee-wee Herman for every day of the year. He said Christmas can be every day thanks to Pee-wee.
Huh.
So which I was like, fuck, man, that's like this. He just sounded like a really cool, down to earth guy. So I don't know how lavishly he lived. Like, I don't know what his worth was or anything like that. I never really thought of it as far as Pee-wee Herman was concerned, but was definitely one of those faces that I grew up with. Again, Saturday morning. It's a thing of the past to get up and watch Saturday morning cartoons and shows, but Pee-wee's Playhouse was a big part of mine. And when I got that alert on my phone, what was it, Sunday?
I think it was formally announced on Monday, but I think he passed on Sunday.
Yeah, I was just like, motherfucker, really?
Yeah, that was kind of that was a really just a sad moment, because I mean, especially for people of our generation, the people who were born in the late 70s into the early 80s, that was, for all of us who were weirdos before we even knew we were weirdos, he was the guy. Yeah, he was the one for us because he was just such an eccentric.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was one of those ones where when it I read about it and I'm like, oh, that's a bummer. But it literally took like a day or two before I was like, oh, that sucks. Like it took a little while before it actually set in.
Yeah. I'm always gonna remember that weird like slick back hairdo with a little spike up front, the gray suit that's too small, and
Yep.
the little bow tie. And because I grew up watching the movie as well, I'm gonna remember that bicycle, that red and white bike with a little lion horn on the front. That
Yes.
it was just absolutely insane and ridiculous, and like you said, eccentric, but it worked. And I can still hear the laugh in my head. I can, the secret word of the day is, and they all yell when somebody would say the word. I definitely remember Larry Fishburne because he wasn't Lawrence yet.
No.
As Cowboy Curtis showing up and going, "Golly, Pee-Wee." It's very interesting to think if you make Cowboy Curtis, if that was Morpheus's alter ego in the Matrix, how things would have played out, when he got disconnected, he ended up being Morpheus in the trench coat and everything else. But it's very interesting if you go back and check out all the people that helped out with Pee-Wee's shows, especially after Pee-Wee's Playhouse. Once he finally started getting back on his feet, he revived those shows. He went back on tour. Had different places, and people were willing to go watch him. He was an iconic personality, and it's a very, very unfortunate. I think 70 is definitely way too young for somebody of his caliber, and he's going to be sorely missed. So, rest in peace,
I,
Mr.
I
Reubens.
I think for me one of the big fine moments was at the 1991 MTV Video Music Awards. The show opens, and for the first time in over a year, because I think the bust was in the summer of 1990, maybe.
Okay.
So it had been a while, and the show opens with Reubens walking out in the Pee-Wee Herman persona. He walks out, and at first he just stands there and just lets the crowd just like go wild, and everyone's yelling and carrying on and yelling stuff and everything like that. And he just like soaks it in for like a minute or so. And then he looks at he gets on the mic and he just says, "Heard any good jokes lately?"
That's a good one.
Yeah, he absolutely slayed. And I was like, man, that was just so cool. Because I remember watching that when I was a little kid, and I was like, whoa, Pee-wee's back? What's going to happen? This is wild. So, and yeah, it was one of those things where, and then, yeah, you're right. For most of the 90s, he just wasn't around because he was actually outperforming, he was doing his routine in person. He wasn't on TV or anything, correct?
I believe like for the first few years, it was relatively quiet, like radio silence kind of thing. I mean, yeah, I'm sure he probably performed in certain places that would have him, but for the most part, yeah, it was just no TV, no movie, and just did what he could, to just hang on. I don't know what his deal was for Pee-wee's Playhouse. That was on air for a while, but like anything, when the bad thing happens to a celebrity, they pull all the shows and the residuals go away and everything else. But the show did go back on in reruns in certain areas in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And at that point, people were like, oh, yeah, remember this? This was fucking great. We grew up on this stuff. So, yeah, to have the 90s essentially be relatively quiet for his career and then to go back to it was just kind of weird. Honorable mention for anybody who watches old Disney movies. If you ever watched Flight of the Navigator, Pee-Wee Herman does the voice of the spaceship.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Because he has a very monotone voice throughout the entire performance. He's learning about, human history and human interactions and everything. But at one point, the character does a Pee-Wee Herman voice. And you're like, holy shit, that sounds just like him. Well, if you look in the credits, it's not going to be Pee-Wee Herman or Paul Reubens. I believe it's billed as Paul Mall. He didn't want to be billed as Pee-Wee Herman for that role. But
weird.
Yeah. Okay. And it's one of those things. Another thing, I grew up with that voice. I grew up with that character. Watching him in Cheech and Chong, I was completely fucking flabbergasted. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? But He's been around. He's done a bunch of different things. He's on TV as other characters. Let's also not forget Batman Returns. He was the father of the Penguin in the opening montage of the movie.
Yes, he was. Yes,
So-
with Sandra Barnhart, I believe.
Was that Sandra
Bernhard.
Bernhard?
I'm pretty sure it was.
I don't recall off the top of my head. I'm gonna have to take your word for that one.
It
And
was. It's been such a spell since I've seen that movie. I don't quite recall exactly, but I want to say it was her.
But
But
again, he's been around for
for
so
me,
long.
one of his roles, like the first time I think I saw him back in anything was when he played the pot dealing and later coke dealing hairdresser in Blow.
Yes.
Yeah, because he was fantastic in that.
It's one of those roles where you just weren't expecting him, and then when he shows up, especially with Bobcat Goldthwait, who's checking to see if the drugs are legit, you're like, "What the fuck am I watching here?"
Yeah, it's like why is my childhood doing cocaine together?
Just the way it works out was kind of odd. Are you looking up to see if that was her?
Never mind. It was not Sandra Bernhard. It was Diane Salinger, who I've never heard of before.
And I believe they both reprised the role in another DC outing as the Penguin parents again. Also, those two actors were, well, Pee-wee himself and Simone in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, who worked the waitress as the waitress in the diner.
I was about to say, was that Simone?
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm looking up Diane Salinger now, and I was like, holy crap, that's wild.
Specifically, I remember when they're sitting in the big T-Rex and they're looking out at the screen or out of the mouth of the T-Rex. And the following morning when they walk out, and she yells out, "Andy," and all of a sudden, "Andy!" As the big burly boyfriend is all pissed off that they were hanging out together for so long. Yeah, great stuff, man. Also, another movie that helped me out when I had a job in retail. I had my boss came from Texas, and I asked him, I was like, "Is it true if you say that line from Pee-wee, like the other people in Texas respond?" He goes, "What line?" He goes, "The stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas." And he says, "Yeah, actually, it does work on certain people depending where you go." I was like, "Holy shit!"
Oh, I thought for sure you were just going to look at him and be like, does the Alamo really have a basement or not?
In light of his passing, the Alamo actually put out a statement saying they are going to miss him. They love what he's done for the history and for the culture of the Alamo. They can only reiterate that there is no basement in the Alamo itself, but there is a basement under the gift shop. So please visit anytime you want.
Awesome.
I was like, that's fucking cool, man.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there you go. Another one of our childhood heroes, unfortunately, is gone and has left this mortal plane, but we have lots and lots of stuff to look back on.
I was going to say, I mean, it is definitely sad he went, but yeah, he left a wonderful legacy behind in all of the movies and television and performances and work he did. So yeah, go enjoy it.
Yep. Well, sir, I think that we have reached the end of the night. We've done Oppenheimer, we've done Barbie, and we've said farewell to Mr. Reubens. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think we've covered more than enough ground for this evening.
All right. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. My name is Eric Hernandez.
And I'm Doug.
There you go. Thank you for listening. We are the Rabblecast.